We're going to proceed to Senate Bill 34 and 35 subsequent to that. Senator Gatti, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with Senate Bill 34. This bill is designed to save money in premium cost for our businesses in our district and for our citizens in our district. As y'all are well aware, in the 90s we passed a little law that has a nickname, no pay, no play. And in no pay, no play, basically what that means is that if someone is involved in an accident and it's not their fault and they don't have insurance on their car, then they cannot collect from the insurance company of the liable party. People estimate that, or the department has estimated that about 13 or 15% of the people driving on today's roads are uninsured. So this is an important law. I'm not trying to change the basis of that law at all. The person without insurance still would not recover. However, over the years, what has happened is if you own a business and one of your employees is driving a company car and he runs into the back of someone, all right, and they don't have minimum liability policy, so the person that your employee runs into cannot collect from your commercial liability policy or your commercial automobile policy or your fleet policy or any of the policies you have because they didn't pay into the insurance game, so they cannot play when it comes time to recover the first $15,000 of their losses. In my neck of the woods, a lot of companies asked me to do this bill, to draft this bill, because what they found is that even though a payment is not made by their commercial carrier to the other party, that their rates would go up. And when they would contact their insurance company and say, hey, you know, that wreck that Jim Bob had back in November, I mean, we won that case because it was no pay, no play. There was no money paid out of my policy at all. And they would say, well, you're correct. No money was paid, but because your employee caused the wreck, we can still increase your rates. So what this bill does is it actually allows the employer or the citizen to get a benefit from this legal fiction that the legislature created with no pay, no play. Because, as y'all know, under Civil Code Article 2315, that's where we start. It says, every act, whatever man that causes damage to another obliges him by whose fault it happened to repair it. If you hurt somebody, you got to pay for it. That's accountability. That's throughout our state. We made one exception of that. We've made several exceptions, but the exception of no pay, no play means that if I cause you damage, but you don't have insurance, I don't have to pay you for your damages. So it's an exception to Civil Code Article 2315. What this does is it allows the company or the individual who causes the accident, when there's no payment made on their policy, to receive whether they won't be penalized by an increase in their rates. The bill also provides for a recovery aspect so that the employer or the owner of the fleet, the business or the citizen has a right that if their rates are raised in the situation we just talked about, they can recover any excess premiums they had to pay during the disputed time. And if they have to hire someone to help them get through the process of having their premiums reduced back down, then there will be a penalty, I think, up to $1,000 that would be paid to them. So that's what the bill does, and I'd take any questions at this time if they're allowed.
Senator LaFleur.
So, Senator Gatti, essentially, it's if you're the tortfeasor and you don't have to pay, even though you caused the accident, you get a kind of free ride on that accident. Is essentially what you're saying, and that cannot be used against you on your own premium.
That's correct, Senator LaFleur. In golf terms, it'd be a mulligan. You know how you get it. This doesn't affect you. Go again, and because really the employer is the one that was left out. You know what I'm getting at? The employer is the one that was left out of this compromise in the 90s because they thought, well, my rates are going to go down because these people can't collect. But in essence, what could happen is if they it's fender benders too. It's the under 15,000. I mean, if it's a 50,000 or 100,000 or $1 million claim, then we all know that no play only talks about not collecting the first 15,000. If you have a $100,000 claim, then you can collect $85,000. You just can't collect the first 15. So you are correct. This would just bring the employer, the citizen, into that compromise, and say, look, we haven't paid anything out, so we're not gonna hit you with a risk. Yeah, and I think it just brings it back down because, as you know, we have some of the highest insurance rates in the nation. And no pay, no play was the reason we all negotiated that, and we talked about it. We were for it so that rates would go down to at least a southern average or the top of the southern average, and that hasn't happened. And so, since it didn't happen naturally, this is a way that we can do it to bring rates down. And it means if you own a plumbing company, you got 20 vans in your fleet, and one of your workers bumps into someone, the person that he bumps into doesn't have car insurance, then your company won't be penalized with as if he caused a wreck that they had to pay on. Now, that being said, if you own that plumbing company and your guy runs into someone and they have insurance, well, this doesn't affect your rates. Will go up. That risk assessment will happen on that claim. We're just carving out a subset that says, okay, you allege the defense of no pay, no play. And when you allege that defense, you still have to provide counsel for the person, but once a judge determines this person let their policy lapse, this person did not pay their premium, then in essence, you cannot come back and ding the employer or the citizen who caused the wreck. So,
I like your analogy, mulligan.
Thank you. I've been waiting to use that one.
Senator Lambert.
Senator Gatti, I guess, and that's what I was going to be asking about, is the problem is when there's an accident over $15,000 and you have exposure, this statute should not apply, correct?
That's correct, and that may require an amendment. Now
That's
that I
what I
think about
was
it.
looking at it because it says it's an affirmative defense whenever the defense is used and it doesn't say amount of the payout.
Right, and I think that I would need to, based on Senator LaFleur's question, I would need to offer or draft an amendment that would limit this to claims that are valued less than the $15,000 in bodily injury and the $25,000 in property damage.
Correct.
So, if based on your question, I'd like to voluntarily defer the bill and have help of the staff to draft that amendment so that we can put it in its proper form. But if there's any other questions, I'd like to answer them at this time.
All right. That's all I have.
Thank you, Senator Lambert.
Senator Johns.
Senator Gatti, I was here when we did no pay, no play, and I will remind the committee that we actually mandated in that legislation that, if I remember correctly, that liability insurance rates would be reduced by 10%. So there was some reduction in costs back then. I guess over time rates have increased because of claim history, circumstances, just the way that insurance works. I guess my question with this bill is, you have an insured, and I understand the 15,000 is a low threshold, but you have an individual, you have an accident, it's a $100,000 accident, 85,000 is paid out, and that individual, suppose he has 3 or 4 of those in over a period of time. And so he's not penalized, according to your bill, he's not penalized? He cannot be penalized because of the fact that he was at fault?
Well, if based on the amendment that we'll do based on Senator Lambert's question, I'll answer it 2 ways. If the driver of the plumbing truck in the fleet, if he hits 4 folks and they all don't have insurance, and every one of those incidents is under $15,000, then his company would not have an increase in rates. And it doesn't seem, it may not seem common sense or fair, but when no pay, no play was passed, we told injured people, you can't collect. You have an injury, you have x-ray bill at LSU Shreveport, you've got a doctor bill, you've got car repairs you need, and those are real fungible damages, but you can't collect them. So
Right, because they made a conscious decision on their part not to carry insurance, where you and I and all the other hard-working people of this state who do pay high rates chose to do what our law says we have to do. They made a conscious decision not to participate in mandatory liability insurance, so they're being penalized. It was just another tool, another way to try to get that uninsured motorist off of the highway. So.
And I agree. I agree with the law. It's a good law. I like the law. I like no pay, no play, and I think it's a genius way to encourage people to pay, or you don't get to play. And it has worked wonders. And the number of uninsured has dropped over time. And this is just a way for our businesses and citizens to have the same opportunity to participate in the scheme or procedure that was created by that good law.
Right.
And I do think that if odds are, if someone, back to your hypothetical, if they do have 4 instances with the same company and they've bumped into 4 people, odds are they're not going to hit 4 uninsured people. It may, based on the 13% of the people that are uninsured. You know, I'm not good in math. I'm not good in Common Core math, but it would probably be pretty tough for them to hit 4 folks that were uninsured. But I do understand that could be an issue, because hypothetically you could have somebody that bumps into a lot of people and they're all uninsured and their rates would not go up. And I'm not sure what the likelihood of that would be.
I think your bill does need a lot of work, so
Okay.
you may want to take a look at it.
And I'll think about that issue that you
Okay.
brought up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Long?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Gatti, help me work through this. I'm the guy driving the truck. I work for the plumbing company. I'll use the illustration that's been used. I've had 4 accidents, but because they all were under $15,000, now I go and apply for personal insurance. Does the company have a right to underwrite my risk based upon the fact that I had 4 claims but were not counted against me? I'm struggling to understand why this bill creates a sense of fairness, and I think we all would agree that insurance companies need to be held accountable, rates need to be managed, but I'm a little bit concerned where it goes, because it's not just a commercial issue. It can become an issue that companies are going to have to deal with as they personally underwrite a risk. Just your thoughts on that.
Well, and I think that goes back to Senator Lambert's question and Senator John's concern. And based on those concerns, I mean, if we did have a situation where someone had 3, 5, 10, 20, or 50 fender benders where they were at fault every time, and every time that situation happened, the person they bumped did not have insurance.
Right.
Then of course that would be a situation that would need to be addressed by this bill. You know.
Okay.
But the situation I'm trying to address, and I appreciate the concern,
Right.
is the concern that if you own a fleet, or if you have a family with several vehicles and they bump into someone, it is a minor accident, no money transfers from the insurance company to the plaintiff or the injured party, then it under no pay no play
Right.
defense that there shouldn't be a risk assessment that increases premiums based on that claim. However, I will research that issue, because quite frankly I hadn't thought of that.
Right.
And I know you've been in the business and you've probably seen
Right.
that hundreds of times.
Well, the other thing, I think the concept is noble from the perspective, but let me say this: if I'm the driver and I've had 3 or 4 accidents, maybe not chargeable, but under the scenario that you did, if I own the company, I'm probably losing my job, because all of a sudden it's just a matter of time till it's no longer worth $15,000. So just some thoughts.
Well, and I'll tell you this, just on the families that I know that own those mom and pop companies, if they have a driver that causes a wreck,
Right.
they're not going to be around.
Right.
Because they care more about public safety, these mom and pops, than, hey, does this affect my bottom line? So if they have someone with 2, 3, 4, 5, or 10 or 20, I mean, it's not going to get that high.
You're right.
Yeah, and so I think what we'll have is a situation where we can amend the bill to give, a limit of how many times someone can benefit from this
Right.
not being assessed as a risk to their driving abilities. And I will draft that amendment with the help of
And I
staff.
want to compliment you for working through this process. I think it's important. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Long.
Senator Gatti, I will remind the committee, has moved to voluntarily defer Senate Bill 34. Before he did that, there were 7 cards in opposition. Is there any further discussion? Is there any objection to that motion? Without objection, Senate Bill 34 is deferred. Thank you, Senator Gatti.